Civil Disobedience, H.D. Thoru. Presentation by Indra, Guest Lecturer, Department of English, SF, CPA College, Bodinayakanur. Henry David Thoreau was born on July 12, 1817. He became a school teacher but did not like the job because he was expected by the authorities to can the students in order to discipline them. Thoreau felt that our lives are smoothed by luxuries. He wanted to prove that man could live a far happier life by cutting out all inessential things. He experimented with this style by living for 2 years in a small hut which he himself had built by the Warden Pond in Concord. He lived a very simple life close to nature, trying to achieve self realization. After 2 years, he left the hut, saying he had several more lives to live and could not spare any more for that one. Civil Disobedience original title was Resistance to Civil Government. During this period, he came to town to get his shoes mended. He was arrested for not paying taxes. An aunt of his paid the tax in his behalf, and he was released the very next day. Yet, the incident led him to write Civil Disobedience, in which he explained how to resist an unjust government in a non violent manner. This tract influenced Mahatma Gandhi and helped him to evolve his principle of satyagraha. Thoreau and Emerson admired each other. Emerson introduced Thoreau to Manusmriti, Hitabadesa, Vishnu Purana, Bhagavad Gita, and the other ancient Hindu religious tracts. Thoreau passed away on May 6, 1862. People should refuse the unjust government. Thoreau begins his essay by arguing that government rarely proves itself useful and that it derives its power from the majority. It is because they are the strongest group and not because they hold the most legitimate viewpoint. He contends that pupils' first obligation is to do what they believe is right and not to follow the law dictated by the majority. When a government is unjust, pupils should refuse to be dictated by the majority. When a government is unjust, pupils should refuse to follow the law and distance themselves from the government in general. A person not obliged to devote all his life to eliminating evils from the world, but he is obligated not to participate in such evils. The government is best which governs least. Thoreau opens civil disobedience with the Jeffersonian idea that government is best which governs the least. He speaks in favor of government that does not intrude upon men's lives. Thoreau goes a step further and says that the best government is one which does not govern at all but leaves the pupil absolutely free. A government is only an expedient, that is, a useful instrument, not a binding principle. The government is a system chosen by the people to express their general will. A government is sometimes misused. Government follows expediency. Instead of the individual controlling the government controls the individual. The few who run government to do so to promote their own ends. The government does not stop wars or solve problems or educate the people. Instead of individual of following certain noble principles, the government follows expediency. That is, it does things are useful but not necessarily fair or moral. We need a better government. To express openly what type of government is meritorious is the first step towards obtaining it. Unjust laws must be broken. In the American tradition, men have a recognized and cherished right of revolution from which Thoreau derives the concept of civil disobedience. A man disgraces himself by associating with the government that treats even some of its citizens unjustly, even if he is not the direct victim of its injustice. Thoreau stresses that what we need is action based on right principles. We must find out what is right and change the existing social structure suitably. This results in respecting the divine in man. When there is unjust law in society, what should the conscious man do? He cannot obey it. It is not easy to change the unjust law. Sacrificing life for noble cause will never gain everlasting fame. The government severely punishes those who violate the law, however unjust it might be. Christ was crucified, Copernicus and Washington and Franklin were pronounced as rebels. If a sensitive man is sure that law is unjust, he should break it, whatever be the punishment for it. Thor gives an example to defend his point. Suppose a tax collector who is an agent of the government to levy an unjust tax, what should a citizen do? If he refuses to pay the tax, he will be put in jail. Thoreau says that we need not to be frightened of such a development. He regards this as the beginning of a great struggle to establish the right. What should the conscious man do? Thoreau says that under an evil government, the true place for a just man is the prison. The free man goes to jail and the slaves remain outside. If 1,000 pupils refuse to pay the tax, it will create a dislocation in society. But this is certainly better than paying taxes to enable a government to wage bloody wars. If the tax collector refuses to collect the unjust tax and resigns his office, a great revolution will be set in motion. The might cause some bloodshed, but says Thoreau, this bloodshed will develop a man's real manhood and his immortality will flow out as he bleeds to an everlasting death. That is, the man who lays down his life for a noble cause will gain everlasting fame. Two evils of the American government. Thoreau says that the American government of his time supports two evils, the existence of slavery and the war with Mexico. Unfortunately, the people of Massachusetts are much more interested in making money than in humanitarian issues. They obey the existing laws blindly. Their conscience is wasted away. Many are opposed to slavery and war but do nothing dynamic to root out these evils. Thoreau observes that under the name of order and civil government, we support our own meanness. We stop with merely casting our votes. We do not actively fight for good causes. Protect against injustice. Thoreau is not affected by the apparently invincible might of the state. One cannot do everything, but one need not despair. Something can be achieved even by a single individual. He can send a petition to the government, does not respond to the petition. What is the petition to do? The Constitution does not suggest any way out. Thoreau says that those who are against slavery should withdraw their support to the government. Even if just one man withdraws his support, it is a great gain, points out by Thoreau. Prison, the popular place for just a person. Thoreau points out that a person is the popular place for just a person to live in under an unjust government. Thoreau prefers the imprisonment of the offender to the seizure of the goods. Poverty and richness and related terms, the more money, the less virtue. Some people you cannot spare the protection of the existing government and they dread the consequences to their property and the families of disobedience to it. But Thoreau won't. The harassment of the government is so terrible that it is impossible for men to live honestly. Thoreau's views on freedom. Thoreau says that if a man's thought free, fancy free, and imagination free, that is, if a man has a free thinking power, free fancy, and free imagination, imprisonment cannot affect him anyway. He says that government must promote free trade, freedom of union, and freedom of correct behavior. Only if people live freely, a country can become strong. All religious scriptures emphasize the value of freedom, but no legislator has the wisdom and practical talent to incorporate the teachings of religious scriptures into legislation. Four important principles by Thoreau. He pronounces four important principles in his treatise Civil Disobedience. There, a man should obey his conscience and not the unjust laws of the land. He should be prepared to go to jail as a consequence of disobeying the authorities. In a country ruled by an unjust government, the right place for a thinking, conscious individual is the jail. When the righteous people court arrest, a strong anti government campaign will be set in motion. The unjust government will be finally forced by the general revolt to cancel its unjust laws. Conscience is the supreme judge. At present, the party which enjoys the support of the majority forms the government. This is wrong. The government run by the majority may not care for justice. It is not the majority but one's conscience that should decide what is right. The majority can decide only those matters which are governed by expediency. Conscience is the supreme judge in matters relating to what is right and wrong. Thoreau says that one must be a man with an alert conscience and then only a citizen. Most people lay on importance on confronting to the law. We should cultivate a respect for what is right. The citizen should not surrender his conscience to the legislator. Unjust laws must be broken. Thoreau stresses that what we need is action based on right principles. We must find out what is right and change the existing social structure suitably. This results in respecting the divine in man. What there is an unjust law in society, what should the conscious man do? He cannot obey it. It is not easy to change the unjust law, for the government severely punishes those who violate the law. However unjust it might be, Christ was crucified, Copernicus and Luther were excommunicated, and Washington and Franklin were pronounced as risible. What I have to do is to see, at any rate, that I do not lend myself to the wrong which I condemn. That government is best. That government is best which governs not at all. That is, an ideal government leaves the individual absolutely free. In another context, he advances the audacious notion that the only house in a slave state in which free a man can abide the honor is the prison. Thoreau looks upon the evil state as a huge mission which the just man has to resist. He says, let your life be a counter to stop the mission. Thus, both intellectually and stylistically, Civil Disobedience, remarkable essay.